Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our 10-part series, The Psychology of Salah, where we are analysing the different components of Salah more deeply so that we can, inshallah, get more out of our prayer, our daily prayer, and understand our prayer from the perspective of what is actually happening within us, within our mind and within our heart. So do keep watching and inshallah we'll be covering each of the steps of the Salah, and my guest is again Brother Ghulam Abbas Lakha, who is going to take us through these different steps of the prayer. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've had the opportunity to think about Salah from the point of view of its psychology. So the point of our discussions is to try and get more value from what we're already doing, and to try and taste some of the beautiful fruits that are available from this banquet that Salah represents. But all too often, we feel that we just don't have the time to do so. That particularly the afternoon prayer with Dhuhr, we are in the middle of a working day, we may just have, half an hour for lunch. And so then the question changes. For ourselves, it changes from how can I do my Salah in the best way I can to how can I just do my Salah, full stop. Yeah. And we kind of shut down all the possibilities of the beautiful connection and the rejuvenation and the nourishment and the benefits that accrue from the idea of spending a long time doing your prayers. Now, of course, if you have the time, that's great. But if you don't have the time, does that mean that all that benefit is not for you? I would argue no, absolutely not. Because the entity with whom we are seeking to connect, that qurbatan ilallah, to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we believe that He's outside of time and outside of space, outside of these limitations of our existence, then the degree and the depth of our connection with Him and the sweetness of that and the benefit of that is not about time then. It's about connection. Yeah. So if we switch tracks from time to connection, to qurba, then it doesn't matter how much time we have. If we have only a few minutes for our salah, within those few minutes, we can achieve an extraordinary degree of connection, provided we have the requisite mindset to do that and the appropriate degree of mindfulness for what we are actually doing. So that when we have just 10 minutes, we say to ourselves that these 10 minutes are sacred. So we put a ring around them, we ring fence that time. That this is the time that I'm not going to be thinking about the problem I was working on this morning or what I will be working on this afternoon. But this is now my time to connect with my Creator. Yeah. And in that approach, then the question afterwards changes as well. So often we're told, oh, did you say your prayers? And it becomes binary, like a legal question. Did you fulfill your legal obligation or did you not fulfill your legal obligation? But actually, Salah is so much more than that. As we saw from Surah Ma'un, where it said, Waylun lil Musalli, that woe upon those who do pray. Who are those? The following verse 5 says, well, actually, it's those who pray who are heedless about their prayers, sahun. So, in unpacking that, we also looked at Surah Mu'minun, which said, Qad aflahal mu'minun. And then, so it said the believers are successful. And who are they? And it went on to analyze that these are the ones who are mindful about their prayers. And then subsequently in verse 9 talks about how these are the people who safeguard their prayers, who maintain the sanctity of their prayers. Nowhere did it, in any of those verses, did it say that in order to be amongst the successful ones, you need to spend hours and hours on your prayer mat. It doesn't say that at all. And neither does it say that if you only have a limited amount of time, then woe to you. No, that's not what it says. What it says is if you're heedless. So even if you have a limited amount of time, and if you've got a very short lunch break, let's say, or if you are a parent with little children and you just can't get more than a few minutes of private time because there's so many demands upon you, those few minutes can be sacred. And we're told that Salah is the miraj of the believer, the spiritual ascension of the believer. Well, we're told that during the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his holy progenies, miraj, his ascension, that entire journey was completed in a time frame that was so short that the chain on his front door was still moving. And there is a sign for us in that, because all too often we are the ones who shut down, who close the door to connection, because we believe we're somehow ineligible. Either because of our sins or our mistakes, or somehow we haven't achieved a predefined artificial level of piety. When actually that's all artificial, because the only thing that is real is the grace of Allah. So that connection can never be earned or achieved or worked for, but that connection is always a gift. Yeah. And it's a gift that you can't earn and achieve and therefore make it something that is yours and part of your ego. But it is and always remains His to give as a gift of grace. Similarly to what we were discussing in wudu, that as we wash our face and our hands and we touch our head and our feet, and it is an opportunity to engage in reflecting on with our head what we're thinking. It's an opportunity to think about thinking as a form of metacognition in a sense. But when we look at how this relates to our psychology and our mental health, it relates quite clearly, to my mind, with treatments for anxiety, depression, and other conditions to manage mental health challenges, such as cognitive behavior therapy and forms of mindfulness therapies, because those all require an understanding of what we're thinking and why, and what types of thinking patterns are helpful and those which are unhelpful. And Salah holds up a set of mirrors from wudu, and when we take that water, and as a drop of that water falls back into the pool, we remember how we can be like that drop that merges into the wider pool of Tawheed, so that that ego dissolves into the oneness of creation, into the unity, the Tawheed that is essential to the Islamic teaching. And then moving on to Qibla, and we were talking about how the physical orientation towards the Kaaba, towards Mecca, is the outer of what should be going on internally, and the four dimensions of the internal move. So firstly, as we are orientating towards what we are supposed to be doing with our lives, we're also simultaneously turning away from that which is maladaptive, that which is unhelpful, things that maybe we say to ourselves or that we say to other people that hold us back and limit what we can do. To give a simple example, if a student who's got a maths test thinks, oh, I'm terrible at maths, that person is less likely to be able to do well in the exam, less likely to be able to learn. If I have a bad relationship with somebody and I keep thinking bad things about that person, and that person doesn't like me and that person has bad thoughts about me in my mind, then I'm likely to maintain that acrimonious relationship as it is. But if I take charge of my own thinking, then even if the experience of what that other person does, even if the events of what that other person does may not change, my experience of it can. So I can separate events and experience out so that I can become more in control of my experience of my life, even though I may not be able to control all the events of my life. And this is really the power of Salah, so that when we go back to the rest of our lives, that connection remains, even though we may not be formally on the prayer mat. But that worship then switches from formal worship in the form of Salah to then general worship in the form of everything we do. So that connection from Salah provides the secret to transform everything else that we do into worship. So that when I get back to my desk and I'm earning an honest livelihood, doing so in a state of connection transforms that work itself into worship, so that then the connection remains a consistent thread that may move through different parts of the tapestry of our day, but the consistency of that thread remains unbroken, and therefore provides a form of strength to cohesively wrap our day together and help us remain on the path that truly inspires us? Which also raises a question of what is it that inspires us? And Salah asks that question very clearly. And one of the points that enables us to reflect upon what inspires us is the adhan and the iqamah. And I think it's important to pause on this step, to get off at this station and just think about what it means to be at that point of adhan and iqamah. Because we've done wudu, we have orientated ourselves towards qibla, not just in terms of where we should be going, but also what the thoughts and patterns we should be moving away from, but also thinking wider in terms of all the Muslims from different points in the world, from across different spaces, so spatial awareness, all over the world, all the Muslims are pointing in this direction. So we're connecting in a cohesive, collective sense, in the sense of ummah, of community. But also there's a fourth dimension of time, an intertemporal dimension, whereby we are connecting to that point of focus in Makkah that all the Muslims in preceding generations and all the saints have done so, galvanizing our focus to the next step. And the next step is really thinking about what truly inspires us. And that's what adhan really represents. We begin with Allahu Akbar, 4 times no less, declaring that Allah is the greatest. But it raises the question that for my life today, is my connection with Allah truly Akbar for me? And this is where I come back to the original question that, we may ask someone, have you said your prayers? A parent might ask a child that, did you say your prayers? As a binary legal thing. But actually, maybe the question should become deeper and say, how was your prayer?
Yeah.
How did you find it?
Yeah, very good point.
Like when you meet a bosom friend, then the question is not, did you meet that friend? That's a very superficial question.
Yeah.
The more important question was, how was the encounter?
Yeah.
And that's really the way we should be thinking about our salah. So the question we need to ask ourselves afterwards was, how was that? How was that encounter? How am I left different? By the way, these questions don't take time. We can be asking ourselves as we're walking back to our desk, how was that encounter for me? What happened? How am I different now? And if the answer is I am no different, in fact I'm more stressed because I've got 10 minutes less than I previously did, it should remind us to think more deeply about the purpose of that salah. In our previous discussions we looked at verses from the Holy Quran that highlighted the fact that these principles are not there to create burden for us, but rather to purify us and to enable us to progress and to unfold and to develop. And this is really what adhan represents in terms of setting out the roadmap. If you think about the preceding steps as filling fuel in your car, adhan is really about setting the course on your sat-nav. Where are you going? Because with that beginning of Tawheed, we then start moving into Wilaya and acknowledging and recognizing the role of Rasulullah ﷺ and the role of Wilaya thereafter. But then there are also some very clear reference, particularly in the Shia tradition, with having declared Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah twice, and then to say Ashhadu anna Aliyan Waliullah. So what is that about? And the point about recognizing his example of what it meant to pray, such that the Holy Quran itself says that he gave zakah in a state of ruku.
Yeah.
That's who he was referring to. And when we look at the commentaries, we find that in Zamakhshari, in Ibn Abbas, in various commentaries. So as an example of what it means to have an example, a role model for connection in salah. But then there are important aspects of hayya ala salah. What is this hasten? But what are we hastening to? What is the salah? And this aspect of hastening is really about movement. So that salah should not be a static process, but really a dynamic force for our change and our development. And then the next statement of hayya ala al-falah, that hasten towards success, but really falah also has aspects of harvest, of the unfolding, of benefiting from what has been going on for so long. So a farmer may plant a seed, but it's at the time of harvest that the time of benefit really comes. And that's what that verse is saying, that hasten to the harvest. Our notion, our analogy of being invited to a divine banquet is not unfounded. Hayya ala al-falah is that invitation. Yeah. But then, in case there's any doubt, we then have a third assertion to hasten towards the best of actions. Khayr al-amal. Now, there are many good actions. We have dhikr, we have all kinds of remembrance. But we are told that salah is wali dhikrillahi akbar, that this is the highest form of dhikr, which really raises the question of why. Because dhikr is an incredibly powerful form of connecting with Allah, that invocation, that meditative connection to Allah. Which means that if salah is the highest form of dhikr, then it is a form of meditation, a moving meditation. But that degree of connection should be the kind of connection you get from the highest form of dhikr. Now, let's juxtapose that with our usual experience of salah, particularly at lunchtime for busy people. We are given false ideas in our minds that long salah of connection is for those who have time. We people who are very busy don't have time for that kind of connection. But actually, those notions fall away when you think about salah as a form of dhikr, because if you're doing dhikr for even a minute, you should benefit from that connection, even if it is just for a moment. So it ceases to be about time altogether. And this idea of hayya ala khayr al-amal just reminds us of that. And then we reiterate the goal that Allah is the greatest aspect of our lives and connecting with Him is important. And therefore, we conclude with La ilaha illallah, reiterating Tawheed, that there is no God but Allah, so that all the false gods I have in my own head about ego, about what social media may be saying about me. I mean, we see the alarming rise of depression and other mental health conditions among young people and teenagers. And some psychologists attribute that to the pressures from social media. So regarding social gods that we have created, when we assert La ilaha illallah, we free ourselves in that moment from all the ruminating that goes on, that is a feature of different kinds of mental health illnesses, that ruminating, that continuous thinking about a problem of the past or an anxiety about the future. So really, adhan becomes incredibly powerful. But there's another way of thinking about it, in that we could say that it is not obligatory, neither is iqamah, that you can just go straight into niyyah and takbirat al-ihram. But that's like saying, if I give you permission to come into my house whenever you want to, legally you have the right to do so. But you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would knock. And knocking on the door doesn't just mean that you are acknowledging that you are entering a sacred space of somebody's house, in this case, salah, the connection. But it really prepares the one who knocks. The process of knocking is important, not just for those inside the house. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever present, so He doesn't need that. But we do. We need to knock, so that as we enter into that sacred space of salah, we are mentally ready to do so. And then as we go into iqamah, this idea of what is available becomes even more stark, because here we add the notion of قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, that surely there's a definite aspect to this, in that there is an assertion that the prayer has already been established. قَدْ قَامَ الصَّلَاةِ, the prayer has already been established. But how can that be? I mean, legally, from a Sharia point of view, it would begin with the takbirat al-ihram. But yet in iqamah, we're already asserting that the prayer has been established. So what is it that has been established when we're saying قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ? Well, You could say from a social point of view and perhaps a literal point of view that from the perspective of a congregational prayer, then that people have stood up and are ready to start. So focus. Okay, that's one approach. But a psychological approach is deeper than that. Because if we have responded to the invitation of connection that we got from wudu or qibla or adhan, then by that, if we took any of those opportunities to really connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for that qurbat in Allah, for that proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you can quite correctly and quite validly assert qad qamatu salah, because even though the legal aspect of salah hasn't begun, the connection between the beloved and the beloved has already been established. So when we recite that, it's an invitation for us. But I want to pause here and just look at what some of the teachings tell us about the importance of thinking about the importance of adhan and iqamah. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is cited in Sheikh al-Saduq's text. And of course, Imam Jafar Sadiq is a scholar respected across the Muslim community. Yeah. And in this text, Man la yakhtarul faqih, it is narrated that he says that whoever recites adhan and iqamah, so this is if you're praying on your own. Okay. So if you're at work or wherever, you've just got 10 minutes. All our discussions are not aimed at increasing the work you have to do. It's about getting more value from what you're already doing. And one of the things is a mindfulness of that. So this next narration just blew me away when I first encountered it. He says that whenever somebody recites adhan and iqamah, and by the way, that only takes a few moments, a minute you can do it. He says 2 rows of angels will perform the prayer behind this person. But if the person only recites iqamah without adhan, then there will be 2 angels, one on the right, one on the left, praying with this person. Now imagine if a person, upon completion of iqamah, is mindful of the fact that he or she is leading 2 rows of angels in prayer. What would the quality of the concentration be like? What would the degree of mindfulness be? What would the extent of presence of heart be?
Well, I think if I was thinking about that the first time, I might be very nervous. Suddenly you've got this feeling of responsibility because, you know, you're. But I suppose if you get used to that idea and you are aware of that, then you become aware of a certain company, you know, the divine company that's with you while you're doing your salah. And I do know people who have seen, again, lights arriving when they start their salah, lights arriving on the musalla. So yeah, perhaps that was the angelic presence.
There are many mystical teachings about what salah can really represent. And in texts like Sirru Salah, Salatul Arifin, from Ayatollah Khomeini, alayhi rahmah, it just gives us a sense as to what is available in terms of spiritual connection. But moving away from the mystical and coming back to the squarely psychological, of course the two are related, but sticking with psychology from a point of view of mental health, awareness of what is potentially around us and grounding in the present moment through adhan and iqamah would at least do one thing, which is to break the shackles of rumination. And if we do nothing but that, that is an incredible gift of salah. Because one of the painful aspects that people report from depression is the constant sense of that burden, of that sense of what is getting us down, or indeed just a general draining away of energy, and in some cases hope.
Yeah.
Whereas when we are saying قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, that prayer has already been established, there is a hope that actually we're participating in something sacred and that we're worthy of that.
Yeah.
And again, I come back to that analogy of an invitation to a divine banquet, because we have been deemed worthy of such a sacred invitation. So what does it matter if somebody wrote something unkind about us on Twitter or Facebook? It's rendered into a completely different context. I'm not saying it's okay for people to abuse us. No, of course it's not. But that event doesn't have to be conflated, collapsed with our experience of that event. We can separate them out. And recognizing the incredible potential that we have, each of us have, is incredibly powerful and empowering, and gives us hope for what we can do and what we can experience. And hope, we have found from empirical studies, is incredibly powerful for preserving our mental health. And when we encounter mental health difficulties, it has been shown that individuals who find that their therapy is plausible and they have hope that it'll help them do much better in psychotherapy than those who don't.
Okay.
So the adhan and the iqamah is very important, because if we have hope, therefore, that it is plausible for us to experience that connection, not because we're so great or because we have so much time, but no, because the invitation is a sacred invitation of grace, then that grace is what becomes the focus of our attention, and thereby also giving us relief from our rumination, from our constant preoccupation with the worries that have become such a prevalent feature of 21st century life.
I think that's a good point as well, which perhaps we can talk about more throughout the programs, which many people may not have heard of before, this idea, like you say, of what you experience or what happens to you.
The events.
Yeah, and what you experience from it. Because I think many people it will not have occurred to people before that how I experience something is within my power.
Yes.
So the events that happen to me might not be in my power, or, that's another discussion on our input into something that might have brought it about, or whatever. And du'as we can make, obviously, to help a situation. But the initial experience of something is within our power, to look at how we respond to something. And so I guess when we are going for Salah, during a very busy, stressed schedule, that you don't need to respond to that time for Salah as if, oh my God, I've got so much to do, and and feeling anxious, and I can't connect to my Salah, which is making me feel even worse about myself. And
guilt then comes in.
Yes. But rather, it's possible in that time, those few moments, to just decide to think differently. So you can actually make a decision about how you're going to think in those moments.
And for me, the Holy Quran has many verses that really highlight the need to shift our thinking about what our lives are about. And this is where I would like to conclude this discussion on a verse that I think has many layers of psychological value. Surah Al-An'am, Surah 6, verse 162, which says, "Qul, say, inna salati, surely my prayer, my salah, wa nusuki, and my rites of sacrifice, of worship, really, wa Mahyaya wa mamati, my living and my dying. So the entirety of what human life represents. Lillahi is for Allah, Rabbil Alameen. And the word Rabb is important because this is really about the one who nourishes. Yeah. We see from Surah Ibn Israel the word Rabb taken into a wider sense when we pray for our parents. Rabb irhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira. Oh my Lord, and the word Rabb is used for Lord. The Lord nourisher, it would be one translation of Rabb. Nourish my parents as they nourished me, Rabbayani, when I was small. So when we are talking about the entirety of our existence in this verse 6, that my prayer, my actions, my striving, my life and my death are all for Allah, then that changes the experience of all of that. We may not have control over the events, but if we connect through all the aspects of our lives, then the experience of our lives does remain in our control. Right. And this is the invitation of hope that Salah represents, regardless of the time we may have available for it.
Thank you very much. Good insights there. And thanks for watching. We will see you in the next program, inshallah. Again, this is a series of 10, so do look out for the next one. If you've missed the previous ones, you can find them online, inshallah, and this will take you through all of the aspects of the Salah. So, inshallah, we will see you in the next program. Assalamu alaikum.